We better start with Ombudsman, fellas. And I suppose at the start of the season, Kevin, you probably wouldn't have expected this horse to be the Longines top-rated horse of the year, but it's probably this performance at Ascot that staked his claim to.
Oh, definitely so. When you look at the rating, Boyce, this is where the rating comes from. And look, Ombudsman, what I would say is while he is clearly top class in terms of the rating that he has at the minute, he had a rare opportunity here in terms of the chance to run a huge number. You know, it's rare in this part of the world that you get a Group 1 that's run at an overly fast pace. You know, he was held up right off it, and through no design, I suppose, he was bottled up and was made to wait, which I think was to his benefit. And I think that race gave him the chance to show us the very last ounce of what he has in him.
Is that a polite way of saying he was flattered, or is it just that was the optimum circumstances to produce?
No, and the reason I frame it that way, it's not damning with faint praise or anything, it's just that when we look at the ratings, and people will take what I would say an overly simplistic view and say Ombudsman, he's 2 pounds clear of the field, etc. The point I'm making is that particular race gave him the absolute maximum opportunity to run a big number. And I would suggest that if you put Calandigan or Delacroix in the same very unusual set of circumstances, they would currently be rated higher than they are now. You know, I know it's not quite, you know what I'm saying in that, they couldn't necessarily have run in that race.
Ratings are all about opportunity, and he was given the opportunity
to post it. It gave him the absolute maximum chance to run a huge number, and he duly did, you know. But just it's a context worth bearing in mind when we look at those numbers, because we will inevitably, as we often do, come back to the ratings. But the devil is in the detail.
I'm hoping, Sean, it'll just be a nice, evenly run race, and the best horse will win, and the pacemakers, after they've done their job, will exit stage left.
Can be difficult, Kevin, the pacemaker thing, maintaining contact between the pacemaker and the horse he's meant to be making the pace for, particularly when the field is big, they can get disconnected, and then
massively important factor. You know, it's the links in the chain, and when the biggest guns are probably going to be ridden with a bit of patience, they are reliant on those links in the chain being maintained, and the middle links, or we'll say the links in the top third, doing the right thing. And that's ultimately what went wrong at York. You had Danon the Seal, who was acting as the link between the big guns and the pacemaker, and jumped out, took a pull, completely got disconnected from the pacemaker, and we ended up with a bit of a mess. You know, so there's controllables and uncontrollables. You hope with a field this size that contact will be maintained, and as Rixie says, that look, it'll just be a better than even pace. You know, that'll help to sort out the field, you know, take away any compression turning into the straight, and we find out what the best horse is. You know, Sandown was such a fascinating race to watch, because I don't think we saw the best of either of them, because they both had things go not quite ideally. And like Rixie, I agree with Rixie's point about the fast backup for Ombudsman. That was, you know, probably a factor. But the tactics of it, like Buick had to probably change plan 3 different times in the race. You know, Delacroix, things went wrong as well. You know, and look, we ended up with a barnstorming finish. You know, but which is the best? You know, you hope that this is where we come to find out. I kind of wish we saw it at Leopardstown. We didn't get to see it, but we're getting to see it now. And look, this is a great stage to have the decider.
Well, selfishly, I'm glad that we didn't see the left side, because we're going to see it at Ascot tomorrow on our channel. But it's a fair point you make. But in that muddling sort of situation at Sandown, it was Delacroix who came out on top. Now, Calandigan, I think, is a fascinating horse. We saw him at Epsom, didn't convert that run into a win, but he's back at Ascot, which is arguably the scene of some of his greatest performances. Some would say, though, arguably his greatest performance, like here in the King George, are over the 1.5 miles. What's your take? I'll go to you first, Kevin. Where are you on Calandigan?
He's a world-class horse, Boyce, no question. This was a proper victory. You know, Calpana, we know, went for home. This was a little bit messy. Tactically wasn't what people expected, but Calandigan, as Rixie says, you know, is pretty much a habitual hold-up horse at this stage, and he was able to pounce and get all the bananas. Look, is he as good at a 1.25 miles? Has he had the opportunity to show it either way? Maybe not, but I think this is his stage to do so. I think we'd all be a little surprised if ultimately this wasn't a well-run champion stakes. So that'll give him the maximum opportunity to do it. And look, he's a very, very good horse.
We're all assuming that there will be pace, aren't we? Because there's two of the big horses have got their own pacemakers in there. There are other horses who will push on as well. Potentially, there should be pace, which should suit Calandigan.
You're right to ask the question, Boyce, because the assumption is the most dangerous thing in these situations. And there has been examples of that this summer, where everyone assumed the race will be run in a certain way. And, sometimes some sets of connections have played into that, changed tack, moved the pieces around the puzzle a little bit to give themselves an advantage. But with pacemakers from both leading camps, I think it's you'd be very surprised if it wasn't running.
It could be very interesting if one of the pacemakers' job is actually to put the brakes on in front of the other one.
We've seen it. It's happened before.
Well, it wouldn't surprise if Delacroix reverted to more prominent tactics and he just sat outside his pacemaker a little bit, Yeah,
I think, to be honest, reading between the lines, I think that's probably what they had in mind at Leopardstown, and Soumillon just reacted to the way the early stages were playing out and ended up getting a little bit quieter.
I thought Soumillon's comments post-race were interesting. He said he got a bit colty in the stalls. He said he's a real... he's a man's man, this kind of fella. So maybe that's just a sign that he's getting bigger and stronger, and he probably needs to take a little bit of time with him because he just can't be that bit gassy early.
Economics, haven't seen him for a year. We know what he can do. We know what his frailty is as well. He is a wild card, though, isn't he? If he turns over, maybe fresh is the time to run. I don't know. As a horseman, Kev, is there anything in that this might be the time to catch him?
Well, look, the fact that Haggis is running him here,
it's a hell of a shout,
when it's so deep, and there are alternative options knocking around. If he wanted a stepping stone to something else, look, he's here. It's fantastic that he's back. Such a talented horse. What he did last year was unbelievable. Could you back him at this point? I think you'd need to be exceptionally brave, even at a double-figure price. As we look at it right now, I don't see a bet. And I don't. If ever there is a race where you don't need to burden yourself with a selection, I think this is probably it. I will have plenty of selections through the car, but I found myself looking at this and saying, you know what? I'm going to enjoy this.
Kevin's best bet is horse racing is the winner.
There you go.
Let's have a look at the Long Distance Cup, which kicks off the whole day, actually. Tomorrow it is our first race on the card and the first Group 1 race on the card. And Trawlerman, as I said before the break, dominating the market. Took the race a couple of years ago, in between Trushan and Kyprios successes. He's a 1-2 favourite, Stay True 5-1. His stablemate, that's Trawlerman's stablemate, Sweet William for Jonathan Gosden, next in 5.5. Bit of a gap then to Al Kareem on 12-1, and Saratoga, a very big price and presumably expected to have other duties in the race perhaps. But Trawlerman sets the standard, and we know how good he is. This is his Gold Cup romp, chased by his stablemate at this stage, who eventually finishes in 4th place. Are there, Kevin, chinks in his armour? How do you see the race panning out?
Oh, sure, look, it's pretty simple, I'd say, Boyce, in that he'll go forward. Saratoga might go with him. But look, this was a great display of staying, wasn't it? Jumped out, made all, dragged them into deep water and drowned them. With the proven stayer.
It's a great way of putting it. It's great. Yes.
But that's really what it was. All the imagery aside, like they set out to make this a stamina test. Illinois' stamina was unproven, and they took him into deep water. And it doesn't get any deeper than 2.5 miles in a Gold Cup, and he was brilliant that day. And what was interesting was, to me, post that race, the talk was that they were going to repeat what they've done before, that they'd give him a little freshen up and get him back for this race tomorrow. They obviously chose to change as the season progressed, and they gave him the run at York. And I thought that if he was going to be vulnerable anywhere, he might be vulnerable there. And they went and took him on. They sent up, Shackleton, up to take him on early. And the way the race panned out, all of the main rivals to him had a right fair shot at him. None of them could get past. He was well on top of them at the line. And I thought to myself after that, right, it's going to take a real one to beat you at Ascot. And a few that might have taken him on here aren't here. And look, he's fully entitled to be 2s on.
I like Stay True. Look, that was a career best from against Scandinavia in the St. Ledger. And, I thought he ran big because he didn't get cover anywhere the whole race. He had a nice sit, Mikel Barcelona, down the rail, covered less ground, but he just got no cover. I think, given that was such a good, evenly run race on ground with plenty of juice in it, all those little things just add up, don't they? And I think going up and trip on quicker ground might allow him to just do Trollman for a bit of toe.
I think he's the only danger. I think, if Trawlerman does anything close to his thing, I can't see any of the others beating him, because they've had every opportunity to go and beat him at various points in time, and they haven't been able to. Whereas Stay True, we haven't seen the very best of him. And I know some people might look at the St. Ledger and come away from it saying, oh God, he surely wants to go shorter rather than further, given the way he's shaped. But I'm not so sure. Like, you look at his striding, and I think he can be a 2-miler for sure.
Yeah.
Like, he gets his revs down he got his revs lower than anything in that St. Ledger field.
Yeah.
I think what I'd love to see them do, and the fact that Saratoga's in there hints that we might just see it. I'd love them to ride him even quieter and wait and wait and wait, because in both his last 2 starts, I thought he was going to win the Ledger when he made his move forward, and he just ran out of steam close home. I would lean into that and wait and wait and wait, and then have a little think, and then wait some more and have one cut of them and see what happens. Because
Assuming you're within.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If he's good enough to get that close, which we don't know if he is. But look, he's only had 4 starts, and I wouldn't underplay that. Like, that's nothing in the context of a stayer. He's still unexposed. He's still coming forward. He even missed time in the middle of the season. So.
And Sean said there's not a lot between them there in terms of ratings. Like, you've got the Trollerman's peak rating would have come over the 2.5 mile Gold Cup trip at Ascot. So, he's dropping down in trip here now. So he's probably, his peak rating for 2 miles, probably maybe 2 or 3 pounds shy of his
In which case you're in front. You're in front.
There we go.
It's a recurring theme, isn't it? So much depth, very, very open. The sprint division has been particularly open for the last couple of seasons, you could argue, of course. Lazat, 4-1, currently heading the market. We just heard that there's been money for Montasib in the last several hours. Big Mojo for the younger division, 11-2, kind of blue in the same colours as Lazat, of course, 13-2 last year's winner. Flora of Bermuda, Ditto 9-1, 12-1 Rayevka, supplemented quite late on by Grafar for the Aga Khan colours. Inner Sharon 14-1, 18-1, and Bigger Bar those. Now, several of these have met before in the season, so let's take a sample point to have a look. Sprint Cup. This is a snapshot, obviously, but several of these met before, and I suppose sums up that it is very open. They've been winning in their turn, Kevin, to use that old cliche. Where are you on this?
Yeah, it's been the most remarkable season for sprinters. There's literally something completely different happening every time we see them bang heads. And, if we cast our minds back to Royal Ascot, which seems like a long time ago now, and Lazat doing what he did in the Jubilee, you think, okay, here we go. That's the best sprinter in Europe. Take control of the division, go do your thing, beat the Japanese Raider with world-class form, a mile back to the third. This is gelding, this is nice and straightforward. And then, of course, it has been anything but that. He's managed to get beat a couple of times since. Some mitigation, but we know he's a bit of a, he was gelded for a reason. He is a bit of a funny fish by all accounts. He clearly doesn't have quite the level of consistency you'd love a top class one to have, but you do come back to his peak efforts and say, right, if you do that, you're just going to win.
Yes, we'll show that, because this is what Lazat has in his locker. The question mark is that he's failed to reproduce it a couple of times since Lazat, but we'll have a look at him at the Royal meeting.
Is this actually as good as people are making out? I'm not sure it is. Like, I think tactically James Doyle gave me, you look at the sections there, I think he went 14:48, 11:48, 11:33. It was a beautiful building pace on the front end, and James Doyle could do everything he wanted now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know loads about Japanese form. I don't. But aren't the Japanese horses middle distance horses at their very best? This is a 6-year-old coming over here, and the horse back in third, Flora of Bermuda, she was a massive drifter close to the race, and the race fell horribly for her. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, he's certainly looked mortal, hasn't he, in his last couple of runs. That Betfair Sprint Cup Stakes, Big Mojo won it, of course, the 3-year-old, but then we had Kind of Blue, Flora of Bermuda in second and third, and Lazat in fifth. That Wathnan trio, they're all here again.
Yeah.
Look, the one thing you'd say, I suppose, is the day we saw him at his absolute peak was over this course and distance.
Yes.
And 6 furlongs at Ascot in the wider context of the sprint division, like, it is the stiffest test that they meet, and he seemed to really thrive in that set of circumstances.
And it is a course that does produce those specialists. We see it in the handicapping division as well, horses who come back year after year and just perform in that context, usually biggish fields, usually pace.
Yeah. So
who was it? Raising Sands, Jamie Osborne, those kind of horses. Yeah.
It's very tough because you can go down through these, Sean. We could give an hour to this race and go down through them one by one and make a case for why they might win, why they might be overpriced.
Well, let's keep it simple. Why wouldn't what happened last year happen again? Kind of Blue won the race last year in the Watham colours for James Fadgell. Now, this horse has been frustrating this year. He had that incident in France, didn't he, which was arguably not his fault, where they kind of let them go. That was effectively a non-race for him. But the last couple of runs, particularly last time, has shown signs, Declan, that he might be just beginning to come now. And if presumably you'd aim back towards this race with him. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, on the back of the Sean, he didn't run as a 2-year-old kind of Blue, and he had plenty of racing as a 3-year-old. And I actually thought I actually had a slight doubt about his attitude. I think it was probably a case he was more weak, and as the months went on, he was strengthening up. That was a really good performance because he took a good hold in James Doyle's hands that day on proper soft ground, and as you can see, they levitated over to the far rail. But it's a completely contrasting surface tomorrow, and they might race on a completely different part of the track. And coming into the season, given his pedigree, the Tin Man, the Deacon Blues, and they're all horses who got better with age. He was probably the horse at the start of the season you said, this is the most exciting sprinter we have, because he's surely going to get better. And you know, you can give him a pass for the Sean T race where the horse got upset beside him in the stalls. I thought after Newcastle he was completely gone at the game, I really did. But the Fanshawe team have got him back, and you just get the feeling now he's ready to peak at a track over a course and distance where his peak performance has come.
Is he effective on this ground? It was good-ish ground, wasn't it?
I think he's pretty versatile. I think would they like a little bit of juice? Yes, but you're a James Fantry, you're hoping for a heavy dew on Saturday morning.
And just reading between the lines, like, you have to assume that the horse was just all wrong in the first half of the season.
Yeah.
You know, because he came in, like, he would have been amongst the favs for the Jubilee at Royal Ascot, and you'll recall Watnan went in and bought, and then they buy Lazat in the lead up to the race. And I remember seeing that at the time and go, God, Kind of Blue mustn't be going well.
Yeah.
And then he came out and he's run, you know, poorly his first 2 runs of the season, and you just feel that he's coming as the season has come along. And last time, you know, was a very, very good run. So it wouldn't be beyond the realms at all that tomorrow could see his best effort of the season.
Next, Fillies and Mares, the latest Group 1 race that we will look at over the 1.5 miles for the 3-year-olds and upwards. Kalpana 3-1. He was a 3-year-old when winning it last year. For this year, can she retain her crown? Estrange in the same age division, 7-2. Warda for the 3-year-old classic generation, 6-1. Kizizana, interesting raider from France. For Francis Henri Graffard has got a few interesting raiders on the card. Obviously, she ran in the Arc last time. Bedtime Story was also in action in France a couple of weekends ago, as was We Might Take the Long Way, who was part of that blanket finish in the mares race there. We were talking about Calandigan earlier on, but it was her who set sail first, Kalpana, in a bit of a sprint finish. Kevin, what do you make of this in context of tomorrow?
Oh, look, I thought she ran great. Look, we talked about it earlier. It's world-class form. And look, she's taken a little bit of stick this season, Kalpana, because she's got into a couple of battles and she's come out the wrong side of all of them, albeit beaten by very good horses on each occasion. But the Arc, I thought she ran very well in the Arc. She had a rotten spin, you know, in fairness to her, in a race where the draw really did stand up, you know, getting a passage that wide.
Massive, wasn't it? You look at the results.
Yeah, like she had a worse spin than her draw. You would have assumed she would have got from her draw. You know, she had a spin around like one that was drawing 16.
Did you get out the wedding boots that day and walk the track?
I did actually, yeah.
Was it better down that fresh ground on the inside?
It's not even so much that it's better. It's a funny old track, that Arc track, like, because you have a lot of climbing to do in the first 5 furlongs, and if you're having to come from wide and get a position, you have to do an awful lot of running, and there's more turning than people appreciate as well. And the turning, a lot of it's downhill, and if you're established in a position on the rail where you can sit in that like 4 furlongs of turning nearly, I think it's a big difference maker. Whereas if you're caught a little bit wide, you're having to work just to hold your position.
Yeah, we saw that with her. I had to look back at her ride, her sections and stuff like that. There was a lot of chat about the run that she got in the ride. She had the worst run passage through the race, probably of any of the principals, I think it's fair to say. So
it was very tough. And look, this is a drop in class for her, clearly. As good a race as this is, it isn't the Arc. Look, I think they probably would have preferred a bit of softer ground, a bit ground that's a bit more typical. Because I remember taking her on in the Ribblesdale when she was stepping up in trip based on her striding. She's an unusually fast strider for one that does get 12 furlongs. She does get it, but it's fair to say that if the emphasis was on it was less so on stamina, it would probably be to her benefit, because she does rev up very, very high for what she is.
Kizizana, I know our colleague Lauren was very keen on her going to the Arc. She didn't run great in the Arc for me, but she's a smart mare as well. She backs up pretty quickly.
Yeah, she was my selection for the Arc too. And look, she didn't get the kindest of spins around. She was a little bit freer than ideal. I think her connections were pointing to the ground. But look, ultimately, she didn't take the step forward that Lauren and I thought she might be able to. So
she's not entirely missed in the market, unfortunately. You'd hope she might yet go off.
I don't know about you guys, but
good horse,
I think she'll be happier on that ground tomorrow.
Yes.
I think she's quite a nice mover. I think the ground, as much as, and obviously along with the competition, probably got her beaten in the Arc.
Okay.
Yeah, and look, she's everything about her suggests she's a late developer, you know, and I wouldn't like to put a ceiling on her based on the Arc, because it just didn't go her way.
I think the late developing thing, if you go onto batteraces.com and read a stable tour we did with Francis Henry Gafford at the start of the year, he said just so immature as a young horse, couldn't train her. Now it's all clicked into gear and she's running every week.
One horse I keep coming back. Bad news is she's becoming a bit of a cliff horse for me. Good news is she's always a massive price, and she'll be a big price again tomorrow's Bedtime Story, who I really liked her run in the Vermeer. They stretched her out over much further last time, which I'm not sure was suited. But
yeah, look, it was a chancy thing to do, but look, it was probably the right race to try it, in that if it worked, you know, it was quite winnable, I think. But look, I just don't think she got home. You know, you'd love more pace, and you mentioned it, Declan. You wonder how quick the pace is going to be here for her. I think the more pace you have in front of her, the better, because she's just naturally inclined to be a bit on it.
I think you're stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of pace with her, because I don't think you want too much to kind of eat away at her stamina, but then you want enough just to settle her. And she just went the wrong way mentally after the Chesham last year, and they've completely had to reprogram her, haven't they?
Yeah, and you could even see that in her striding. Like she's such an interesting case, because her minimum frequency was getting higher run to run, which is like the exact opposite of what you like to see. It can happen sometimes with the Frankels. They can just go the wrong way a little bit on you that way.
Yeah, but we must start, of course, with Field of Gold. He's the obvious starting point, not just because he's favourite. How big an if is it that we see Field of Gold back tomorrow?
Well, look, it's just going to be a case of how his preparation has gone. You know, I think we can forgive him Goodwood. You know, he did cop a bit of a bump, like a few strides into the race, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's where the lameness emanated from. It was a complete tactical mess, as we know, but you just have to refer back to his body of work, I suppose. And he's been a fantastic horse to watch develop, because we saw him in the Craven, you know, and they were so keen to get him into heavy cover because he was so strong, you know, and to watch him progress now onto the Irish Guineas and onto the St James's Palace, where he didn't get as much cover as you might have liked, but he relaxed lovely anyway, picked up, quickened, put the races to bed really well. And look, you just hope he's back to his best, and you know the Goslings will be in the best position to know. They've had some time to work with him since Goodwood, but there's plenty of miles on the clock for this season already, so it would be. And look, I think it's built into his price. You know, I think if he was coming in here in tip-top order, he would be quite a bit shorter.
Yeah.
But how fantastic is it that we have the leader of the generation in terms of the 3-year-old milers, yet 15 are turning up against them, you know, and there's such depth all the way down through the market there. There's some very good horses here at very big prices.
Well, one of those who hasn't won a Group 1 this year, and I suppose many people, including his connections, will be scratching their heads and say, how has he not won a Group 1 this year, is Rosallion, Declan. And are you a fan of his? Are you keeping the faith in Rosallion? Has he been unlucky? What's your take?
Yeah, he's just the races haven't panned out straightforward from. Look, you can forgive him the Lockins run. It was a seasonal debut off the back of quite a serious illness after Royal Ascot. You can give him that. He ran a screamer in a messy Queen Anne. I thought he ran a screamer again then in a very messy Sussex Stakes. At York, I thought the draw wasn't ideal for him. He's drawn widest of all, and the drop and trip didn't suit. And I think it was the draw this day that meant Sean Levy wanted to take back early in this race and not be 3 and 4 wide without cover again. And it probably just cost him. Look, again, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are and how good your horse is, you always need a little bit of luck in this game. And it just feels like Rosalien hasn't got much of it this season. But look at him here, stretching out, head on the floor, hitting the line well, just brutally unlucky. And, you know, if Field of Gold doesn't kind of hit his straps tomorrow and run up to his best, I'd love to see this horse win a Group 1, because he's an incredibly consistent, tough horse, and he's got a cracking pedigree to be a top stallion.
Yes, you sometimes get pelters when you say a horse deserves to win a race, but where are you on him? Has he been unfortunate, or are we making too many excuses?
Look, in very, very slightly different circumstances, he would have won the three of the biggest mile races of the season. We know the ability is there. Tactically, things haven't gone quite right. Sometimes the races haven't been in his favour. But look, I suppose fundamentally, we know the ability is there. He just needs a setup that allows him to show the absolute max of it. And you'd hope that, stiff mile, he's drawn. We'll talk about the draw, but he's drawn close to Field of Gold. You'd hope that, I suppose, lessons have been learned in terms of his last few starts, in terms of positioning. Does he need to be held up, quite so much? I don't feel he does. And look, his connections will be what have been watching the same races as everyone else, and I'm sure they'll make adjustments too. So look at it, he would be, like you say, don't always like to say it, but he would be considered a very, very deserving winner of this, given the way his season has went. And look, sure, you have to consider him one of the leading contenders. Yeah,
he's solid, isn't he? And we might talk about some other markets where you might want to get involved with.
He's solid, but he hasn't. There was a sense there for a little while. It developed he could be a superstar when he won the St James's Palace. I thought, because the race didn't exactly go well from that day. But Henry Longfellow let that form down a little bit, didn't he? And it wasn't the greatest of race. And I think that's maybe he's suffering that hangover as well this year, because we thought he was going to be a superstar after that, but. Look, don't get me wrong, he's a proper Group 1 horse, but he hasn't developed into that 125 plus horse that we thought he could be.
Yes, and this field is deep, and there's lots of horses. Testament to what you just said, I suppose, is the Queen Anne Stakes. So I touched on Doctrines. Does the market sometimes underestimate Doctrines? He took the Queen Anne by a nose from poor old Rosalien again. But we've also got a few other interesting runners in here who meet again. Dancing Gemini, who's been sort of there or thereabouts in a few of these mile races, and Carl Spackler, who was backed, as I remember, before this race, and still bang there at this stage with the white phase. What do we make of the Queen Anne form there?
This was another really, for a Group 1, this was an absolutely farcical pace, to be honest. I think just looking at the sections there, the first furlong was even, the second furlong was slow, the third furlong was slow, and the fourth furlong was steady. It basically turned into a 4 furlong sprint at the end, and you would have thought that would have suited the likes of Rosalien much more than Docklands, but it's just a testament to how much Docklands loves this track that he managed to dig it out of the fire, even with his jockey throwing the whip away.
Yeah, he did, which is extraordinary. You touched on the draw there, Kevin, and something which I only spotted just because you guys mentioned it in the break there. Aidan O'Brien has the Lion and Winter in 2, Exactly in 3, January in 4. If you wanted to work some kind of tactic or strategy, they're drawn right together. What can that help in any way? Well,
it's just when you lay out the draw in full, it's just interesting to see, because where is the main pace? Fallen Angel is probably the main pace in terms of a natural front runner that's there to
Marvel Man in 6, Fallen Angel in 8 were probably there.
It's middle, and in your mind's eye you kind of hope, in the interest of, I suppose, fairness, that they come arrow straight up the middle with those two leading the way, and what happens, but it's not. We don't live in a fair world, Sean. It doesn't always happen like that. And you just look at where the big guns are, and you have a little cluster there at Field of Gold, Never So Brave, Rosalien, all drawn high, all likely to be ridden with a little bit of patience. And like you say, my eye was drawn down to the bottom half of the draw, because you have Exactly, who I'd imagine will look to make the running or push the pace. January probably won't be that far behind. And the Lion in Winter, who is Christoph Soumillon's ride, is drawn too. And with the Lion in Winter, obviously he's on a bit of a retrieval mission. He came into the season with very high hopes. He has been hit and miss, but in fairness, his better runs have been, very good, I feel. And if you're associated with him, to my mind, you're thinking, we've got nothing to lose here. We've got a lot to gain, very little to lose. If they wanted to, now I'm sure the track will be walked and everything else, but could there be a thought to go do a solo and have their own contest in their section of the track?
What have you winkled out for us? Classic Blake.
Yeah,
18-1 shots.
This is But I always do this in Champions Day, Boyce, with obviously with mixed results, obviously. But I just always think this meeting is a great one.
You don't have to be right very often.
Well, this is it. It's like typically in a more typical year on soft ground in particular, you always love to have a crack because funny things can happen. We have a more orthodox surface, I suppose, here. But look, I still wanted to go have a swinger. We didn't get to mention them in the preview of the sprint, but King Cooan, trained by Paddy Toomey, is an interesting horse. He missed his entire 3-year-old year, and he's been playing catch-up as a result, but he should have beaten Art Power at the Curragh last time, and just the type of horse he is, he tends to miss the kick, and he travels very strongly. I think the straight 6 at Ascot will really suit him. And I'm expecting a career best from him. He definitely needs one, and probably a big one. But at the price he is, I thought he was worth taking a chance on. And the line in winter is even chancier. But I think there's a tactical angle to it with his stablemates drawn close to him at the complete opposite side to the main form picks. And I just think he could outrun those odds